This isn't the first time we've had an Ayurveda-based brand on the podcast, and it won't be the last. The movement to bring Ayurveda to the West is rapidly evolving, and companies all over the world are putting their own spin on the science. Michelle Ranavat, the founder and CEO of Ranavat, started her journey with a deep passion for beauty and for skincare. We asked Michelle about her self-care brand, sourcing ingredients, how her previous career supported her in starting this company, and how she's connecting her two cultures in a modern way. Don't forget to go and support the brand after listening. You grew up in Milwaukee, and you've talked about being inspired by your dad and your family of Indian immigrants and how they worked really hard to build a life here. And I know that I can relate to that. Growing up in the Midwest, what was that like? Growing up in Wisconsin, and what were you like as a kid?
I having just the only experience that I have is my own. I think, I sometimes wonder what it would be like because my kids go to school here in LA where everything is so vegetarian is like the norm. But growing up, as you probably can understand, that wasn't the case. People didn't understand vegetarian. People didn't understand oil in my hair. They just didn't understand us, and they thought we were Native American versus Indian even, right? So like the lens of understanding what my cultural background was just so different than what it is today. And I'd like to say that, we've all had a collective role in shaping what the new generation looks, feels, and understands about our culture, which is super exciting. But, going to your question, what was it like? I mean, I think I still love my, upbringing. And I think it was hard, but I do look at those struggles of not being accepted, being super shy as things that I feel like are my superpower now, or that give me empathy or allow me to understand what it's like to be, a kid that's different. And so I'm glad that, it was hard, but I wouldn't change it.
I was listening to Akash's podcast actually, and we had him on. He was like the first guest for this season. So I know that you both connected, and you were talking about dance. You were talking about Garba on his podcast. And I wanted to ask you what different kinds of experiences you had as you were growing up to really connect with your culture, because, now you're running a very culture-driven brand. It's rooted in your heritage. Where did that all start?
I think it started from, of course, our parents instilling, that importance of knowing your roots and exposing us, because without exposure, we would really never know. I mean, it was actually hard to accept so many of these differences. And so with our parents kind of encouraging us and, whether it be through dance or garba or playing the sitar or watching Bollywood movies, listening to, Hindi music in the car. Like there's so many different ways that we were exposed to those different avenues. And I think some of us, looking at my sisters, like some connected with food more, some connected with dance. And so we all kind of have our different ways of connecting with our culture. But I think it all happened through our parents and through exposure. Because without that, you don't know what you don't know, really.
Along with seeing how people actually aligned with the missions of their brands today and how they became that person, we also like to see, where people got their entrepreneurial roots. Like, was that within the family, or, were you that kid? We had some guests tell us like that they were that kid, selling candy or, trying to make money any way that they could and hustling when they were younger. So everyone has a story. So what was yours?
Yeah, and I definitely think you hit it on the head in terms of just, it was my circumstances, right? Like just growing up and being a part of my dad's business, whether it was intentional or not, it was just out of necessity. And that has been probably one of the most valuable things. And I think that's why representation is so important, because if you see something happen in front of you, you know someone that did that, especially a parent, that makes it feel like it's possible. And I think that's, truly why it's critical that we get, more South Asian brands when it comes to skincare, but not even South Asian community, just people in general. We gotta grow the pie. And then I think what's going to happen is there's just going to be more excellence in the world. There's going to be more viewpoints. People are going to feel like they're spoken to more intimately through the brands that represent them. And that's really exciting and where we want to go. But it's really hard to do that if you've never seen it done before. And then on top of it, you're trying to explain something where there's, hundreds of years of history where that hasn't happened, right? So like if you think about Sephora, we were the first skincare brand that's Ayurvedic to go in, it wasn't like they were looking for me. Like they were actually probably not looking. They're probably finding reasons to say no. Now I think they'd say different story. But, I think that, of course, I understand from their perspective, they make decisions and they have to have data. And if you don't have data, it's really hard to make your case. So how do you become the first person? It's really tough.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. Like, our stories matter, and it's important to do that. And you talk about getting into Sephora and it being a tough time. So what did that look like for you?
I think it was a lot of just feeling really passionate and honestly, I didn't, and I mean, looking back on it, I might say, yeah, it was critical that we got into Sephora, especially when we did, just for the growth and vision of the brand. It's opened up so many doors for us. But at that time, honestly, I wanted to get in, but if I didn't, I wasn't going to quit. Like I was still going to build this brand and do what I want to do and continue to grow. And there are plenty of brands that aren't in Sephora and are huge. And so for me, I think I was just so focused on knowing and building the case that this is something that people want. And eventually the two things kind of came together at once. But I would have gone on regardless, I think. And that's something that I feel like is really important, because when you become too dependent on certain milestones, like in my opinion, like who are we to say what the path is? Like if we get to our answer and we are able to do what we want to do, I'm not going to be picky about what store it's in or how I get there. I just want to grow this company and be able to make, luxury skincare and have it go mainstream. That's really not up to me, the Sephora piece of it. Because I think if you put too much weight into that, you start doubting yourself because you have a vision of, no, my path is like, I have to accomplish these things. Otherwise it's not my dream. But who are you to say how that's going to be accomplished? I genuinely feel like it's not up to us.
That's so huge, because if you put all that weight into getting into a Sephora or whatever that is, I always think about the flip side of that. Like, what does life look like when that doesn't happen? Because you put all of your validation in the hand claps and what, you envision success. But it's such a great point to point out, like, hey, it's all about getting it out there and it will find who it needs to reach. So just to back up for a bit, what was that aha moment of saying, that you had to yourself, like, you know what, why isn't this in a Sephora, or this needs to get out there? What did that moment look like for you?
That moment, and I'm sure you've seen this, through a lot of the, people that you've interviewed, but it always comes from a personal problem that you need to solve. So that is the same thing that happened to me. I went through a lot of postpartum hair loss. I didn't know who I was looking in the mirror, just being a new mom and trying to figure out what my place in the world was after that. And that's when I started to get into my roots. When you are moving into that next generation, you actually start looking at your history and you want to feel grounded and you want to, because you're trying to instill these things in someone else now. Like before, you were just like responsible for accepting things that were given to you. And when you kind of become that person in the new phase, you start thinking about these things. And so I honestly, it really just came from a need where I started to actually take this stuff seriously. I couldn't find what I liked. I also didn't feel like I wanted to go shopping for beauty in an Indian grocery store. So I was like, this needs to change. Why isn't this out there? What can I do? And I realized that so much of what I needed to do to get something like this off the ground was actually literally everything that I already knew, how to create a product, supply chain, quality, engineering. And so that I just sort of sprung into action and started to solve the problem that I have. And I definitely, part of the problem, it was that it didn't exist in the way I wanted to, like the luxury aspect, but it didn't exist in the place that I wanted it to exist. Like, I think we should all be able to shop in places that represent who we are, especially, and I don't even want to say the modern South Asian person, because this brand and the goal was always to be bigger than that. Of course, I have to do justice to the core community, because if they don't believe in it, then I don't have something. But I want people to feel that representation in places that they hadn't seen before, but also looking from the outside in, people not South Asian, I wanted them to get exposure to our rituals so that, if you're meeting someone and you're like, oh, you put oil in your hair. Oh, I used the Ranavat one too. And I liked it. And you can have a conversation versus what it was before. It was like, oh, that's gross. I don't know. And then you're like, see you later, because you don't know about that person. But now, because it's accessible and everyone's using it, you can have a shared experience and grow closer from it. So that was the goal always. And, it took 5 years to get, or 4-ish, 4 to 5 to get there, which is cool. It took a long time.
Were there any particular rituals that you had in your family that inspired you?
Yes, but it's, I come from a family of hard workers. So my rituals weren't like meditate or anything. They were like, work really hard and put your, all of your effort into everything that you do, be honest, run an honest business. My dad always talks about like, you always want to, if you're not sleeping at night because of something in your business and maybe you're doing something wrong, do you want to make sure that, not that businesses don't have problems, but I think his point is like, you should never, nothing is worth a moral compromise. You should always do things the right way. And then he always said, you want to try to make money in your sleep, which is hilarious. But I think that just means global markets, thinking bigger, having a digital presence. Just because a Sephora store closes at 6, it doesn't mean, people can't shop with me. And I think that's really huge and important just from a business perspective. So I always appreciated that, that feedback.
I, during the pandemic, went on a giant splurge of just products from all over the internet, just trying to try different brands. And I think last year, one of the things I tried was your Kanza wand and also like your brightening serum. And those are both amazing. And I think what I found most incredible was hearing you talk about how hard it is to actually make a Kanza wand. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly didn't know what it was before I came across it with your brand. So it was definitely like an educational experience for me, learning what that was. And I was like, okay, I feel more connected to like the beauty rituals from my heritage now. What was actually like the very first thing that you created for this brand, like as your first prototype, and what was the whole experience of making that and tinkering around with ingredients like?
Yeah. I had initially created a concept that was like mix and mask. So these powder masks or uptans are super popular in Ayurveda. And so I was like, started out with that because I thought it's really easy to manufacture something that doesn't require preservatives in it, just because it's these powders and clays, and then you mix it with these mists, which are jasmine water. I had eucalyptus. I had a couple different ones, and lavender actually was the other one. And so it was a really cool concept. I think I definitely, changed a lot. Like, I don't think there's only one product, the Jasmine Mist, that's still standing today from the original collection. The packaging has changed. And so, where I started is not like where I've ended. And I'm sure even from this point, we will refine and just kind of evolve as a brand. And I think that's really important because, even Coke and Pepsi change their logo every so often. And it's really more that it doesn't matter how valuable your brand is or was, you always have to adjust. Any brand is always constantly evolving. And if you're not evolving, then you should evolve. Like, you should then say that maybe I need to invest in this.
And were you, when you were creating like those, little cocktails of like these different like waters and like products, were you just trying those on yourself or were you having people around you try them?
It was a mixture. In terms of, how I shared the product, like, it was mostly with me, to be honest. And I sent it to a couple of friends, of course, like my parents and all that. And I made like hundreds of batches, like so many. And and then it's like, I didn't have like sophisticated testing at that point. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, maybe I put too much honey in it because it's hardened now. And then I have to adjust the formula. Like, it wasn't like there was like any science exactly behind what it wasn't. And that was kind of on purpose because I really just wanted to start something, make it somewhat simple from a product perspective, because now our process is like crazy. And I don't think if I realized that, I might be like, oh, shit, this is like a lot of work and really expensive to do. But at that time, it was honestly just in my garage, so it didn't really matter. And we were just like mixing everything and making, and then I created 3 things, like 3 different options for each, like a mist and a mask. And then I made sure that they were all the same so that I would label the ones that I needed. So if I knew that one would sell really well, then I could just adjust and I could label it, on the fly. So I just had everything that was like super flexible, and it wasn't perfect at all. But I think what was nice is that it just kind of helped me get started somewhere.
And did you know what you were gonna name it? Like when you were doing all of these initial product testings?
I did. And because I had to create the labels and all that, I initially wanted to call it Monsoon Botanics. And I liked it because I was like, oh, it's like a fresh new beginning, like the first rain after the drought, like the super hot heat in India. And then like the rain falls and everyone feels a sense of like rebirth, renewal, relief in many ways. It's like the time of now they can grow plants and it's like the harvest season. So that's kind of what I was excited about. But then everyone's like, oh, that's like such a monsoon can be a bad connotation. It's like a storm. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just go with my last name because the way that it like looks even is really just from I don't know, like a composition perspective, like the A's in between everything, like it just kind of feels like it flows, and it has a very royal origin, and the entire brand was and is still kind of inspired by the kings and queens of India and their elaborate self-care rituals. So this kind of speaks to that, like the name itself even means palace. So it kind of made sense. And I was like, okay, well, we're going with it.
Mentioned earlier that, you would make these different batches and send it out to family and friends. Your mom's an esthetician, right?
My mother-in-law.
Was she a good guinea pig since she had been in the industry and testing out, different products?
Yeah, definitely. It was really nice to have people, with all sorts of backgrounds, people that didn't know anything about skincare, people that do, just an amazing kind of overall support system, I think was really helpful in building the brand.
No, and I was curious too, like how were you able to take those experiences in the inspiration of the brand and modernize that in places like Sephora, but also maintain its cultural roots, right? And origins of the brand.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think a lot of what that comes from is intention. Like you could be walking somewhere and you could just kind of like go like this, like really slow and walk there, or you could just be really like, I'm walking to that next day. And it's totally different. The way that you arrive, the whole like experience is completely different. So I would say the same thing about infusing culture. A lot of it depends on your intention and the way you present it. For us, it's always with a lot of pride and coming from a place of inclusivity, not just for our community, again, but for everyone. Knowledge, education, I think education is really the greatest gift that we can provide. Even if no one buys the products, at least they can know, oh, hair oiling came from India, saffron's good for the skin, India has luxurious skincare products, and so just kind of leading with that was always what I had intended to do. So I think one is it's just woven into the core fabric of our company. So we have a very strong intention behind sharing the culture authentically. However, as you get mainstream, there's just different things you do to kind of open up the door just a bit and educate and go back to the 101 because you have new audience and you have to really re-educate. And that's something that we do as well. And I think when it comes to the products themselves, like you can't really get more authentic than making it in India using, very, some of them are more historic formulations than others. Some are super modern, but using, Indian ingredients and Indian manufacturing. Some of them are actually very close to the original Ayurvedic recipes. So what's inside will always be so 100% from India. And I think when that's the case, no matter what the branding is, you're always like, what's inside of me, no matter where I live and what I do, it's going to represent that level of authenticity. And so I say the same thing kind of for the product.
Oh, I think that's beautiful, especially the education part. And because I think there's so many products that just us as consumers on this side, we purchase, but we don't know the education behind it. And it wasn't until I was watching an episode of Bridgerton, goodness, a few months ago. And one of the main characters now that they introduced just happened to be Indian. And it was so beautiful because I think it was her older sister was spending time with her talking about dating and, what was to come. And it was just so beautiful because she started using the oil to massage her hair. And it was this beautiful experience that they were creating together that was cultivating these memories. And it was only because I happened to have this connection with Isha and her being so open and educating me and us having the opportunity to chat with different founders, like Akash and his sister Nikita, where I knew now what that was. I could put a name to it, right? And it was such a huge moment. I think I took a video and I sent it to Isha. And so I just love that you talked about education because, your brand deserves to be celebrated in the marketplace and people should know what it is and what it's about and the story behind the name.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I agree. It's little moments like that allow us to form a deeper connection and point of reference to some of the things that, we may take for granted in the South Asian community as well, that like, oh yeah, because we're just so used to keeping things within our culture that we don't realize that maybe people outside hadn't experienced it, and that there's so much love ready for us if we're able to share it in a broader way.
I don't know, like I didn't even think about how it would feel to actually have that ritual shown in this show that like everyone else was watching, and like I had my other South Asian friends being like, oh my gosh, like did you see this? Like they were actually doing the hair oiling ritual in the show, and like this is something we grew up doing, or we had like our grandmothers doing it or our mothers doing it, and to actually see that representation was really huge. And yeah, I was telling Dom, I just couldn't believe it was the first time. And like you said, just keeping things within the culture. Yeah, sometimes we don't realize that other people are really curious about this too, and they can really benefit from it as well, this ritual. And yeah, so that was really, really special to see. I wanted to talk to you about team, actually, because it's something that we love talking about, even just amongst ourselves, but we also love asking all of our guests about it. How long did you wait until after building that first prototype yourself to start recruiting a team?
Oh my God, a long time. I mean, I don't think I hired my first person until like the 4th year in. I mean, it was a really long time. I did use a lot of contractors and was really kind of smart with just paying for hours when I needed them, and specifically getting people that were experts. So it was like, you hire someone for your packaging design, you hire someone from your web, like you're not going to get the web person to then, do your branding. And so it's like, you have to have specialized people. And so when you can't hire, like in my mind, it was kind of like, you can have the Swiss Army knife people, which you always need in the beginning for sure. But you kind of like, if you want to do something well, you have to go with someone that's an expert. And if I can buy a fraction of that person's time, then I'd rather do that than get someone that's just okay at everything and kind of get it out the door. Because I actually think the price kind of comes out to be the same. Not to say that I didn't have, someone early on that was like, answering the PR questions and, putting things up on our site. And like, of course, like, I mean, I did that personally and still sometimes am in the weeds on that stuff too. But yeah, I think there's always that struggle of like, well, I have a finite amount of resources. I can't hire every single person. Where do I make those decisions? And that's where I think contractors come into play. It's a great option.
And yeah, that advice is really valuable, I think, for anyone who's bootstrapping, because obviously you have to be really specific and about your budget and like how you're going to be spending that when you can't hire people to do things full time. I'm bootstrapping my company still, so
Awesome.
I know how hard that is. And it's, yeah, you really do have to just like rely on, these partners that you're finding, contractors, things like that, like smaller agencies, and trying to use that to delegate whatever you can. It is so hard. It's so hard. So I have so much respect for anybody who does that, because it's genuinely a challenge, and it forces you to be really strategic about, the people that you're bringing in, like making sure they're the right people. And on that note, you've positioned yourself as this luxury brand, and you're Ayurveda based, and your brand is like aligned with your heritage. So was it difficult to find people who also believed in the same mission, or once you started looking, did you find that you were just starting to attract people who believe the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to intention, built with very high intention. So I think maybe it is people that were interested just kind of came. I mean, we have probably one of the most incredible teams that I feel exists in beauty. Like every single person is really talented. They're not, any one of them is not like the most senior person or has a super flashy resume. They all have done great things in their previous careers, but they're also people that are like wanting to do the work. And that's something that I think people struggle with, is like everyone wants to have a title, work at a trendy brand, but, where's that sense of urgency, Memorial Day, Friday? Like if there's something that's coming to you that's going to change the company's trajectory, what are you going to say? Are you going to say that you're around and you're ready to take on the challenge? Or are you just going to be like, oh, punching in my time card, So I think we have a great respect for everyone that works on the team. So I truly feel like we're not that startup burnout culture at all. It's again about working really, really smart. But if everyone's a doer and they actually come to the meetings with the materials that they need to present, and everyone can provide their feedback and everyone's feedback is valuable, then you kind of accomplish what you need to do, and things happen pretty quickly. And so we're able to work extremely efficiently.
You said that you were doing all of the, like, you started off doing the social media and things like that. It's easy to sometimes be like, well, no one can do it better than me. Was that something that you went through when you were trying to find someone to help you continue this amazing storytelling that you were doing?
Yeah, I think no one knows it better than you, but there's so many capable people that can actually know more than you. Like that's what you have to kind of come from a humility perspective. I may know my brand. Does that mean I know everything about social media? Am I the person, if I am taking that on, am I also going to be able to do 10 other things? So I think it's not easy, but there has to be some part of you that does trust someone else. And so it is. And does that happen immediately? No, I think it takes a little bit of time, but you find out, I would say, once you kind of give it a little bit of a chance, you find out pretty, not quickly, but like with some certainty that you found the right person.
When you're trying to actually pitch to like a potential team member, I don't know how much of that you do anymore, but I'm sure you did it in the beginning, when people weren't coming to you, from a job board or whatever. How did you approach that? And can you give us your like elevator pitch?
I actually tell people all the problems. I'm like, yeah, this group, we're not communicating. Like we need to work on our processes. Like, this thing is kind of going wrong and we really need to define this. And I kind of give a very clear and honest, brutally honest picture of all the problems. And if that person's like excited to solve them, then great. That's the right person. But I don't actually really try to sell anyone. Of course, there are people that I want to join the team, but the last thing that anybody wants is like, oh, great, like join this amazing thing. Like we just like kind of hang out and have fun together every day. And it's like, well, that is the case, but I need to tell you all the problems, because that part is like, well, yeah, you hope that it is a really nice collaborative environment, that people are really happy. Like to me, that's all table stakes, and I don't really cover that. And that's not a selling point to me. And you kind of figure that out when you meet the founder. And I have a lot of the team interview with me. So they're meeting everyone. So everyone, and one person came to me and they're like, well, I can just like meet the team after I get the offer. And I was like, there's no offer if you don't meet the team. Like that's just not how it works. Like people that would report into this person, they have a say as to whether we're bringing that person on. Like you should have a say on who your boss is and if you like them and if you can work with them. So just like they would have a, say for you. So yeah, I have a little bit of a like non-pitch pitch, but it's been working so far. And I feel like it just attracts like the right kind of person. But for sure, the supportive environment, like honestly, it is, we don't pretend that we're trying to live our lives like always at work. Like we have our very clear distinctions, but when we're at work, we are honestly so kind to one another and so supportive. And we really do love the people we work with. But again, that's not a selling point. That should be the case. And I honestly, it like gives, even from a selfish perspective, I don't want to work at a company that people have an attitude. That doesn't really go well for me either. And then even more selfishly, I think that people are way more productive when they work with people that they enjoy and their ideas are respected and they let other people speak and they like just all of those kind of things. And they come with ideas and you feel like you're not the only one doing work. It's like everyone's doing what they need to do and equally doing so. So, but I think that's all like, given.
Yeah, I think Isha and I we talk about this a lot in terms of like teams and communication styles and being clear and direct about what exactly is going on and what this person is stepping into. It seems like it's just great advice. I think just saying, look, this is what it is. This is what I need help with, and meeting the team also just helps them understand too what the environment and dynamic is going into this, So there's been a lot going on with the brand, and we hear you're transitioning from skin to hair care products. So what is to come with that? And we're curious to know, is that involving partnerships with other retailers, or is this going a different route? How would you define this new transition?
So I would say that it is very core. So one of the reason I even started the brand is because of postpartum hair loss, and the hair oil has been like an OG SKU for us. But you're right. We are kind of diving a bit deeper into the world of hair care. And I think with Ayurveda, the cool thing about South Asian beauty is that it's all kind of one and the same. Like we take a lot of pride and a lot of the reason and beauty perception of beauty that we have, a lot of it comes from hair as well. So we're pretty obsessed. And I think that goes naturally with our line. But in terms of, what's next or how we're creating or, defining that category, I really think we're just doing what we've done. We're going to continue to do the same. Like we're not going to change. We're not going to be a different brand. We are not opening other retailers. Like we're really focused on Sephora. Like for us, it's always narrow and deep. Anything we do. Our team is narrow and deep. Everyone has really deep expertise. We don't have a lot of us. Our product range is narrow and deep. Our retailer, assortment is narrow and deep. So that's just our vibe. That's how we work. That's who we are. So I will never be, 20 SKUs or something, but the ones that we have, we're pretty obsessed with making them amazing.
Right. You're doing what you do best and doing it well, with your SKUs, which I really appreciate. And I also wonder, since making the shift from, skin products, has that been also a huge change in terms of supply chain and packaging for your, for hair care?
No, I think we kind of keep the packaging pretty consistent across. I mean, we had to find some new suppliers for our aluminum cans because, shampoo is something that is very heavily in plastic and, I didn't want to go that route. So yeah, I had to do a little bit of work, but I think we're constantly doing that. I think the hardest thing, honestly, is to stay disciplined because we just want to create a million things. Like we're only launching 3 to 4 products a year. It's not because we don't have ideas and we don't have the capability. Like we absolutely 100% could, but we're just trying to stay, again, narrow and deep, and you have to make decisions.
Yeah. How do you stay disciplined though? Do you have like a benchmark that helps you make the tough decisions when maybe, sometimes we can feel really passionate about doing things one way, but to your point earlier about numbers, like sometimes maybe the numbers don't add up or it may be, it's not aligning with our benchmark. So yeah, how do you make those decisions and stay focused and narrow and deep?
I think it's always being open to change and feedback and taking data and making decisions based on it. Like we launched, we had we weren't able to launch all of our SKUs the year before, just given supply chain and growth that happened. We're launching more SKUs this year. And even the marketing team, they're like, oh, this is kind of a lot. And then we didn't realize that Sephora was going to, encourage us to do other campaigns. Like, honestly, when we looked at the data, we were selling more from the existing SKUs that we have than newness. So if the data is aligning with narrow and deep, like AKA you're making more money during doing that strategy, it's easier for your team and it aligns with your core values. It just makes sense. And so I think part of it is like, you have to be open to that feedback and perception, because of course you have a million ideas. You want to launch everything tomorrow. And we kind of tried to do that a little bit, and the numbers didn't lie. It did not make sense for us to do that. So you have to be disciplined at some point in time and make those tough decisions, because it is fun to launch a lot of products, but can't always be that way. It's also fun selling things you already have. That's less work.
No, I think it's amazing how you guys focus on creating, fewer products, but like really high quality products, right? And like that's really amazing, and the numbers show that works. So that's incredible. I also love that you are so impact driven, impact focused in terms of wanting this brand to go above and beyond just creating these incredible luxury products. And so you're putting money into different organizations that are empowering communities globally. So I'd love for you to talk about, educating the world with your products in regards to Ayurveda, but then allowing that to fuel education about menstrual hygiene or, self-confidence or whatever it may be for people in other parts of the world.
Yeah, no, it's such a great question, and something that I think about all the time. I think about it in two ways. There's definitely a push and pull, like you mentioned. The more that we continue to grow as a company, the more we're able to give back to places like Desai Foundation, where we have made a significant impact. But I think I don't want, I want to make it very clear in terms of the way that we are growing and making that impact. It's really about celebrating the customer. And if I'm thinking about what I want people to know, yes, it's a product with a high price tag, the ingredients and experience and results justify that. But I don't want to be that customer or that brand that doesn't care about their customer and thinks that being rude or inaccessible is like a way to lure people into this world of exclusivity. So I kind of want to redefine what luxury feels like from a customer perspective. So we have invested a very significant amount of people resources on the customer service side. Like, the customer experience team is like, the girl has a marketing degree. Like, she's incredibly smart, but she loves every single customer. She fights for them. She cares deeply about their experience. And she has someone that works with her. Same thing. That girl's a mom and business owner herself. And she works with us, a couple hours a day, but it's like the passion that she puts in. And then we have an education team, 3 people on that team. They are so dedicated to give and impart knowledge, care, love to every person that comes into the door, whether they're in a Sephora store, whether, they're coming through our own DTC channel. But I really want to build a super differentiated, clientele focused customer experience and redefine what people expect from luxury. And I don't know, and then that's, I think, going to feed into the love that we have for organizations like Desai Foundation to kind of, support that, and also kind of like be, that element where people can just feel good about where they're shopping, right? Like, that's just important and critical. You have to want to support the founder and the organizations that they support.
One thing I really love learning about you, just prepping for our time with you today is you just speak a lot about the importance of being authentic, of showing up in different spaces as yourself, and how being more introverted, you felt at a time you maybe have to shift. And I'm sure it's a lot of pressure as well in the beauty industry to shift. And it's just been really great to learn more about your journey in that. And so I wanted to know, can you share more about what that has looked like for you, and when you realize that, hey, I just have to be my full self in these spaces and be authentic. And if someone doesn't like it, that's okay too.
Yeah, I think I just never could not be authentic, and that didn't really bode well for my success in the corporate world, but seems to be celebrated on the entrepreneurial side. So I think that's part of how I probably just found my calling, so to speak, in this world, is because I can't really be fake in any way. It's impossible for me to do that. So I think I found the right place in entrepreneurship, is that you can just say it like it is and create the world that you would have loved to exist in. And yeah, you have to put in a lot of effort to do all of that, but the payoff is amazing because you get to work at a place that you are building. It's exciting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I worked in corporate for a few years, and I just felt like I was dying inside. Corporate's great, right? It has its benefits, but dying inside in the sense where I could not be myself.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started shifting into this world, to your point of creating a world that I want to work in, right? It was like, it was refreshing, and I just felt like I could be my full self. So I'm in the process now of just like freeing myself from a lot of things to just be open and communicate and be myself and not feel like I have to shift so much in different places.
I agree. And I think that is just such a, it's almost like, it's a bad analogy, but being in elementary school or, middle school, it's like the cool kids were the ones that were all a certain type. And then you go to college and you're like, wait, the cool kids are the smart kids, or everyone is okay with their random interests that they have and people celebrate that. And you're like, oh, wait, why did I even worry that much about the whole middle school thing when that was silly. So I think it's kind of similar in that way.
It's just beautiful when I hear people just being authentic. I think it gives hope for people. And I think about myself, if I would have heard someone say that 5 years ago or so, or whenever, it could have really helped open my eyes to embracing myself more. And that's why I'm so passionate when I hear you talk about celebrating, your heritage and culture in the marketplace on TV, because I was always the minority in different spaces and I never felt celebrated or saw that representation. Aww. So I felt like, okay, I need to maybe not speak up when I should, or, you just think you have this internal dialogue, and it all includes shifting versus just embracing, your full self. So it's just a treat to always just talk to someone like that. So yeah, we just thank you.
You're in the right place if that's the case. I think that's just something to always keep in mind. But yeah, thank you so much. This was really exciting. I'm glad that we got to connect and appreciate you guys taking the time. This was a huge pleasure. It was fun.